Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Politics. It's me, your favorite Ohioan. So today we're going to be doing the updated 2022 governor prediction. We did the Senate video 2 days ago, and then, so we're just going to talk about the 2022 Senate election, the governor elections. This is the governor video. Not a only a few races have changed. Like I said, with the Senate race, obviously, if you look at the polls, it shows that things may be narrowing up. But honestly, I don't really think that's the case, and I made a video explaining why. I'll link that one in the pinned comment of this video as well. So keep in mind, this is expecting that the polls are off, as I think they will be, and most people and a lot of people claim they are. That said, this in the future, if this, as time goes on, the polls do continue to show the Democrats doing well, then obviously this will change. But this is as of now, as far as I believe, the red wave is still on. We're going to start by filling in the safe Republican states, which includes states of Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, because Kim Reynolds is pretty popular, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, the state of Ohio. Mike DeWine is he's relatively popular with moderate voters and independents. With Republicans, he's like a lot of more conservative voters think he's a rhino, which he kind of is in some issues, but I mean, he's not the worst. I do support him I don't know. I originally supported Neil Peterson, the third party candidate who was running, but he was disqualified from ballot access, so pretty much DeWine is going to unite the conservative base as well as many independents and moderate voters, and so DeWine's going by a safe margin. As well as his of Texas, Alaska, Vermont, and New Hampshire, because Vermont and New Hampshire have Phil Scott and Chris Sununu, who are two very moderate liberal Republicans, Rockefeller Republicans, however you want to call them, but they're going to win by safe margins. And these are all the safe states, I do believe. Yes, we're going to start by filling the safe Democratic states, of which there are a couple. They include states of California, Hawaii, Maryland, New York, Massachusetts, and that's going to be it. All right, so we're going to start by filling in the likely states. These are states that are going to be under 10 percentage points, the more competitive states. We'll start by filling in the likely Republican states, which include states of Kansas, Georgia, Florida, and that's going to be it. Instead of Kansas, Laura Kelly is the incumbent Democrat. She's by far the most vulnerable Democrat governor coming into the race. And I mean, yeah, sure, there was that referendum that passed, or the people of Kansas voted to not give the legislature the ability to outlaw abortion. But like I said in my video about that, the question was very poorly worded. And if you actually look at the governor primary, not the ballot issue, but the governor primary, Republicans outvoted Democrats by like 100,000 votes. So yeah, Laura Kelly's pretty much dead in arrival. The polls, which are pretty Democratic biased as of now, show that Laura Kelly's losing. She got outvoted by like 100,000 votes in the primary. She's going to lose by a likely margin. Instead of Georgia, Brian Kemp has pretty much united the Republican base. A lot of my gripes with Brian Kemp was about the 2020 election, and even then, I don't really have a huge issue with him. He's a fine governor. I encourage all my supporters of Georgia to go out and support Brian Kemp, vote for him. Vote for him and Herschel Walker. And Brian Kemp's running a solid campaign. He's pretty much united a lot of more moderate voters because of his stance in the 2020 election, and as well as all the solid Republicans because he's up against Stacey Abrams. He's running a good campaign. So Brian Kemp's going to win by a likely margin, probably by about 5 points or so. He's kicking ass in the polls. He's going to win. Instead of Florida, Ron DeSantis, he's also doing very well in the polls. Ron DeSantis has Ron DeSantis and Trump, that combo, have pretty much made Florida a Republican stronghold state at this point. DeSantis is running a great campaign. If you look at his crowd sizes, like DeSantis is holding rallies across the state of Florida, and he's getting huge crowd sizes, and he's winning in all the polls. There's only like 2 or 3 polls that have the race even close, and of those, they're horribly conducted polls. So DeSantis is leading in every single poll conducted. If you look at the energy, the state of Florida as a whole, he's going by a likely margin. The likely states for the Democrats include the states of Colorado, Illinois, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. Looking at the state of Colorado, Jared Polis, the incumbent Democrat, is very popular in the state. He is the perfect fit for Colorado. He is more libertarian, liberal on social issues, but on fiscal issues, he's pretty moderate actually. And for whatever reason, he's just absolutely beloved there. I mean, I don't obviously because of his politics, I'm not a big fan of him. But even if I was a Democrat, I'm not sure what the appeal is exactly. But for whatever reason, he is super popular, and the people of Colorado love him. And the Republicans are basically seating that race. They don't even have a really good candidate, so he's going by a likely margin. Instead of Illinois is pretty interesting. Darren Bailey, the Republican nominee, a lot of people said that he was too far right to win in Illinois. He's too Trump aligned. But Darren Darren Bailey actually did surprisingly well in the Chicago suburbs with more moderate Republicans, more moderate voters, as well as doing very well downstate with a Trumpian base. And polls have the race within 10. J.B. Pritzker as of now leads in most polls by like 8 to 10 points. And I think Darren Bailey, I think he'll outperform the polls by a tad. Darren Bailey's running a great campaign. He's actually calling out J.B. Pritzker for being this elitist billionaire who's done nothing for the state of Illinois. And while I don't think Darren Bailey is going to win, I think he's running a solid campaign, and the polls have the race closer than it should be. So I think that is going to be going to the Democrats by a likely margin. I like Darren Bailey a lot. I hope he wins. I don't think he's going to as of now, but he is making the race more competitive than it should be. Looking at the states of Connecticut and Rhode Island, both are states that are pretty Democratic leaning, but a little more moderate on the local level, but on the federal level, they're pretty Democratic leaning. Connecticut, back in 2018, Ned Lamont, the incumbent Democratic governor, he only barely defeated Bob Stefanowski. Bob Stefanowski is a very moderate Republican who ran a great campaign back in 2018. 2018 was a blue wave year. Democrats did incredible across the country in 2018, and the race was only within 3 points, and Ned Lamont only very narrowly won. That said, Ned Lamont has a very high approval rating. State of Connecticut as of now, he's very well liked there, and Bob Stefanowski doesn't have that appeal that he did back in 2018. His campaign isn't as well. He doesn't have the energy, and so I think that Ned Lamont is going to hang on by a likely margin. Look at the state of Rhode Island. The incumbent Democrat is absolutely despised there. He is the least popular governor in the country right now. That said, he's probably going to get primaried out, and the Republicans have a solid candidate, but it's just too early to tell. So I'm going to keep it in the likely D column. We're going to start by filling in the really competitive states, of which there are several. These are the states that are going to be decided by under 5 percentage points. We're going to start by filling in the lean Republican states, of which there are quite a few. They include states of Nevada, Arizona, and Wisconsin. These are the three lean Republican states. We're starting with the state of Nevada. Joe Lombardo, the Republican nominee, is the sheriff of Clark County. Clark County, if you did not know, is located in southern Nevada. It is the home to Las Vegas. It is a very populated county. And the big issue for Republicans is they have not been able to do well in Clark County, really until Trump came along and energized the blue collar Hispanics and white working class voters of Las Vegas, of which there are quite a few actually. Las Vegas is it's a wealthy town because of the casinos, but there is a very large working class population there, especially a lot of middle lower class Hispanics that Trump did very well with, and that's why Trump has made the state of Nevada, and the Republicans as a whole, doing just better with that demographic, have made Nevada much more competitive. If you look at the rest of the state, pretty much all of Nevada, except for like Reno, which is pretty much a swing area, is solidly Republican. Joe Lombardo is the sheriff of Clark County. He in Las Vegas. He has won elections there before. He is a household name in that part of the state because of how he handled the Las Vegas shooting back in 2018, I believe, or there in the concert. And he handled that. He handled that pretty well overall. Some gripes with that, but that's besides the point. But yeah, he's very well known there. He's very well known in Las Vegas. Joe Lombardo, the Republican nominee, he's very well known there. He's actually pretty well liked across the state. And his opponent, the incumbent Democrat, is not very well liked at all. His approval rating is probably a lot lower than it should be. A lot of voters aren't a big fan of how he handled COVID. Back in 2018, the incumbent Democrat only won by like 4 points in a huge blue wave year. He should have done a lot better. And so because of that, I do think the Republicans are going to flip the state of Nevada, and Joe Lombardo is going to be a great governor. He's very good on immigration, very good on crime, two issues that Nevadans really care about. Going to the state of Arizona, we have Kari Lake is now the Republican nominee for governor, and yes, sure, she has some divisive rhetoric, quote unquote. I think she's great. I think she's a great candidate. She's going to energize the base, and she's going to bring in a lot of more moderate swing voters. Similar to, I think she's going to be kind of like a Glenn Youngkin type or a Doug Mastriano. I don't know. She's an interesting candidate, and I like her a lot. But a lot of people are saying, oh, she's too far right to win. But no, her opponent is Katie Hobbs, who is literally like a Twitter user SJW type. I don't like to use that term, but that's what she is. She barely won her Secretary of State election back in 2020 or 2020 or 2018. Either or. In 2018, which was a blue wave year, Katie Hobbs only very narrowly won her Secretary of State election, and she has actually been sued, and successfully sued, by her campaign staff because of just how she's an awful person. She's not a good person behind closed doors, and so she's running a horrible campaign. All she's talking about is like, oh, gay marriage, and oh, abortion, and oh, I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter. Look at the environment. While Kari Lake is really focusing on the main issues Arizonans care about, such as inflation, immigration, education. So Kari Lake is running a solid campaign for Arizona. If she pivots, it looks like she's done a good job pivoting from the primary to the general. But I'd like to see a little bit more. But yeah, like I said, polls have the race already pretty competitive, and Katie Hobbs is just not a good candidate. She's been she's literally a Bernie bro who's been sued by her own staff because she's she's an asshole basically. Going to the state of Wisconsin, we had the primary there takes place on August 9th, and really other than Laura Kelly, Tony Evers, the incumbent Democrat, is the least popular, is one of the most vulnerable incumbent governors, and he's not very liked in the state. This is Tony Evers is a guy who campaigned on this being this like moderate Democrat who he would he said he's gonna be this like almost a blue dog. He's like, oh, I'll fix the roads, oh, I'll focus on unions, I'll bring back our infrastructure. And then in 2020 when Black Lives Matter and Antifa burned down the city of Kenosha, the Tony Evers, the governor, he refused to send in the National Guard because he wanted to own Trump, and he said it was that's shocking to me that he did that, but that's actually true. The city of Kenosha was burning and Kyle Rittenhouse, had to defend himself in the streets. The National Guard was not sent in because Tony Evers wanted to make the city burn to make Trump look bad. Because Wisconsin's a very critical swing state. It's going back and forth. Trump's made the state very competitive, and because of that, Tony Evers thought that if the city of Kenosha burned, Trump would get blamed for it because he didn't do anything about it. And yeah, other than that, he also said that he was like, oh, he's going to fix the roads, and oh, he's going to bring back unions in the state, and he's done neither of which. And the Republicans have a solid nominee. There's two people running. There's Rebecca Kleefisch, who's more of a moderate Republican, and there's Tim Michels, who's endorsed by Trump, a more authentic conservative, a more America First type. And Tim Michels, I made a video on him. He is a great candidate. He's very economically populist. He's also socially conservative, which Rebecca Kleefisch is not. She's pretty socially moderate. And yeah, so Tim Michels, he's run a great campaign. He's calling out Tony Evers for being weak on crime and infrastructure taxes. He's running a solid campaign, and his ideas for when he gets into office are great. He wants to expand broadband. He wants to bring back unions and blue collar jobs to the state, and he wants to get lobbyists out of politics. Which Madison, Wisconsin, is a pretty corrupt place. In the political world, Wisconsin is one of the more corrupt states. So the fact that Tim Michels wants to do all that, as well as bring back manufacturing jobs and make the state more business friendly, is great to see. And I think he's going to win the Republican primary, and I think he's going to go on to win the general. In the lean Democrat states, there's only, I think, two. Those states of Minnesota and Oregon. Starting in the state of Minnesota, Minnesota could actually be very interesting. Scott Jensen, the Republican nominee, he's a very moderate Republican, but you kind of have to be for Minnesota. And he's running a solid campaign. The polls have the race very competitive. That said, Tim Walz, the incumbent Democrat, is very popular, especially in the Minneapolis area, which is just a huge part of the state. Like the vast majority of the Minnesota population is in the Minneapolis area, and Tim Walz is very popular there. That said, Scott Jensen is running a decent campaign. He's making the race close, and because the race is so close, there's also the legal marijuana party. There's a party in Minnesota that basically their only campaign goal is to legalize weed. And because of that, obviously that's mostly they're probably going to get mostly liberal support if their entire goal is to legalize weed, and that party is going to be on the ballot. Which made me think for a while, oh, Scott Jensen's going to win. The race is already very competitive, and there's a third party that's going to split the Democratic vote. But I've looked a little more, and Tim Walz is just very popular in the Minneapolis area. And the legal weed party has been on the ballot before, and it hasn't affected elections before. I'm not saying it won't this time, but I'm just saying that as of now, I'd like to see a little bit more polling, like to see how big of an effect the legal weed party is going to have. But as of now, I think it's still going to be lean Democratic. State of Oregon, it's a three-way race basically between Tina Kotek, the Democratic nominee, who is an awful nominee. She is horrible. She's literally Kate Brown, the current governor of Oregon, part 2. And they look the same. Their policies are the same. And Kate Brown is despised in Oregon. So the Democrats have a horrible nominee. Republicans have a good nominee, Christine Drazan. Christine Drazen's she's perfect. She's a good fit for Oregon. She is Trumpian enough to fire up the base in rural Oregon, but she's also moderate enough and has enough of a more moderate tone that she can do well in the suburbs. And so Republicans already have a solid candidate. And they also have Betsy Johnson, who is a former Democratic state senator who is running as an independent. For a while, I thought that meant Oregon would go red because we have a good Republican, a bad Democrat, and a third party who's splitting the Democratic vote pretty handily. That said, I looked a little bit more into the race, and Betsy Johnson has pivoted to the right recently. She has talked a lot about. She's actually been calling out Tina Kotek and the Democrats more than she has the Republicans, and because of that, I think that's going to hurt Christine Drazan a little bit more than it probably should. Instead of being mostly like progressives, I think Christine Drazan is going to get like a lot of maybe a couple conservatives supporting her as well, and I don't think she's going to do as well as I first anticipated she would. And so while yes, the race is still going to be very competitive, I'm still going to be looking at polling, and this is definitely subject to change. I think as of now, because the third party nominee Betsy Johnson has pivoted to the right, and I think she's not going to get as many progressive voters as I first thought. We're going to start by filling in these are the 4 states that are going to be the most competitive states in the country, and they are going to tilt to the Republican Party. Not a whole lot of shockers here. We'll start with the state of New Mexico. Mark Ronchetti is a weatherman who was the Republican nominee for Senate back in 2020. He outperformed Trump by like 5 points. He only lost by like 4 points in 2020, which for a Republican in New Mexico in the 2020 environment, that is very good. That is a very good performance. So Mark Ronchetti, he's a Republican nominee for governor now, and he's going to win that race. I mean, the incumbent Democrat Michelle Lujan Grisham, however you say her name, she's very scandal plagued. Her approval rating is pretty low. And polls already have Ronchetti starting to take the lead, and Ronchetti's running a good campaign. I think he's going to win by at least a tilt margin, possibly even a lean at this point. Going to the state of Michigan, Tudor Dixon recently got the Republican nomination to take on Gretchen Whitmer, and Gretchen Whitmer is a very strong incumbent. She has a very strong coalition. She has the Detroit metropolitan, she has inner city Detroit, and she has a lot of union voters who do like her because she has done some stuff with like free community college and fixing the roads and a few good policies. But then again, she has also been disastrous when it comes to lockdowns, social policy. So Gretchen Whitmer is she has a strong coalition, but she is still beatable. And the Republican candidate Tudor Dixon, she is the perfect nominee to defeat Gretchen Whitmer. She'll be able to unite the Republican base, which includes obviously rural voters in the northern part of Michigan, blue-collar manufacturing, steel worker types in the Detroit suburbs, and kind of like the thumb part of Michigan, and like Macomb County. And she'll also do well in the more suburban, upper middle class parts of like Grand Rapids, which is a traditional Republican stronghold, but it's kind of shifting away from the GOP. But Tudor Dixon is the perfect nominee to unite all 3 of those sectors. She's from Grand Rapids and has a big focus on education and tax reform, which will do well in the suburbs. She worked in steel manufacturing, and she's pretty moderate on unions, and she has a good infrastructure plan, which will help her a lot in the more manufacturing, blue collar parts of Michigan. And she's also pretty socially conservative, which will help her do well in the northern part of the state. And so this race will be super close, and Whitmer is a strong incumbent, all things considered. I do think Republicans are narrowly going to pull off the race. Going to Pennsylvania, I think Doug Mastriano is going to win by a tilt margin. The media and everything in Wikipedia is doing everything they can to smear Mastriano as this far right candidate. But Mastriano's running a great campaign. He's literally just done nothing but travel around the state, meet with voters, focus on core issues. He's talked about inflation, education, crime, all 3 big issues in Pennsylvania. And Josh Shapiro has run a pretty bad campaign, all things considered. I mean, Josh Shapiro has really only been campaigning in inner city Philadelphia, and he's been hoping John Fetterman will help carry him over in the more rural areas. Well, Mastriano's been out across the state campaigning, working very hard. And I think Mastriano is going to pull off a very narrow victory in Pennsylvania. All the polls and everyone's saying that Shapiro is going to win. But when you actually look at it, earlier in the cycle, the polls had the race pretty competitive, and Mastriano has ran a great campaign, all things considered. If Mastriano just keeps traveling around the state, meeting with voters, putting ads up, working his butt off, and Shapiro just stays in Philadelphia, tweeting about gay rights and abortion, things that few people really care about, and Mastriano, unless Mastriano says something controversial, which is possible, but I doubt it. Mastriano, he's a smart guy. He has several college degrees. He's got a master's degree in military warfare or something like that. So Mastriano's a very smart guy. I don't think he's going to make any huge slip-ups. And despite all the attention that this race is getting about how, Mastriano, he's this far-right candidate, I think he's still going to narrowly pull it off. I have faith. Mastriano's actually been campaigning. Shapiro has not. Mastriano has a winning message. Shapiro does not. Going to the state of Maine, this is going to be a very close race. Janet Mills, the incumbent Democrat, is relatively popular. She's not beloved, but she's probably a little bit more popular than most people think. That said, Paul LePage is the former governor of Maine. He's well known across the state, and he's basically Trump before Trump. He'll do very well in the rural parts of Maine, the more working class parts, and I think he has just enough appeal. And in a red wave year with inflation, high gas prices, I think he'll do in Democrat turnout probably being lower than expected. I think he'll do very well I don't think he'll do very well, but I think he'll do decently enough in the more liberal parts of the state near the coast that he'll be able to nearly pull off a victory over Janet Mills. Janet Mills just isn't exciting. She's like a generic Democrat. What has Janet Mills done? I can't even tell you. While Paul LePage, yeah, sure, he has an iffy history in Maine. Some controversial comments, some corruption. But that's okay. This guy's Paul LePage is epic. He owns a bar in Maine. He's the former governor, and he's very popular among Republicans there. He'll energize the base, and I think the Democrat turnout. And Janet Mills isn't exciting, and the polls have the race very close. And with the red wave year, I think he's very narrowly going to pull off a victory in the state. So with that, thank you for watching this video of the 2022 governor predictions. I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe.